And we're live. So welcome to Next Gen, November 6th, 2020. My name is Tom Reynolds. I'm the president of the Reynolds Group, and I will be your host for the next 45 minutes. Next Gen is a peer network founded 20 years ago to support manufacturing, distribution, and tech companies. Our mission is to help business leaders adjust, leverage, and thrive. My background is manufacturing and software development. I use this experience to solve marketing problems and create better sales opportunities for clients, not just leads. My business partner is Hema Day. She manages our SEO to sales department, highly focused, financially driven, white glove digital marketing service. Helping me today is Linda Feinholt. She is a business growth strategist and a coach and a great friend. Thanks, Linda. We welcome questions. Please use the chat anytime or raise your hand in the Zoom and ask a question. Linda will manage the process to get them answered in fine fashion. Our speaker today is our good friend, Jim Twerdahl, management consultant and change agent. He has many talents, including interim CFO, director, advisor, coach, mentor, as well as helping manufacturers source and QC in China. The topic today is 10 ways to innovate. It's not enough to build a better mousetrap. So please mute your computers, and Jim, take it away.
Thank you, sir. And first, thanks to Tom for hosting these series of talks. I've learned a lot in the ones that I've been able to attend. And so it's been very well done. Thank you, and hope it continues. I'm going to share my screen and hope that this works the way it's supposed to. Did that seem like it came up as the full screen? Great, okay. And actually you can unmute, because I would encourage active participation and discussion as we go along, because you may have some suggestions, ideas, and other things. So feel free to do that. I'd love to have people chime in whenever they think it's appropriate. I'm going to kind of start with the conclusion, and that is that when this is over, you will have a sheet that can either be downloaded, or I'll send it to you if you give me your email address, that will have 10 different, or more than 10, probably 100 different kinds of innovation that could be valuable for either planning work in your own company or your clients' companies, and to help, change a foot. So as we go on, please chime in. I would love to say that this work was all original work that I did, but it's actually derived a lot from a company called Doblin, a division of Deloitte, which works with major companies on innovation and innovative strategies. And so a lot of it comes from that, and the concluding summary is there. So I can't take credit for it, but I hope you'll enjoy it, because there are a lot of interesting things, because we need to think about innovation in a lot of different ways. You remember in the 1980s, one of the mantras was, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that was really the way people ran their businesses. So they would get them up and running and moving. And if things were going well, they just let it run often until they ran into trouble. So today, if you don't have constant, continuous improvement and grow and progress, adapt, evolve, you die. Now, one of the things that's actually been a benefit to a great many companies is that COVID-19 became a wake-up call, because they quickly learned if they didn't do things to change, that they were going to be in very serious trouble. And even those that didn't end up being in trouble thought they might be. And so a lot of really creative thinking started, and people started to change quite a bit. Now, so that brings us to innovation. And when most people think of innovation, they think about product development and being creative and new widgets and new gadgets, but it's really much, much more than that. And that's what we're going to talk about today. This innovation wheel, comes from the Doblin people, and it's a little bit hard to translate there. So here's a listing of it, and we're going to talk through these various things as we go along. The configuration part of it is really the background, the inside of what goes on in your business that can be very innovative and make a competitive difference, but also uniquely position you to do great works and new things. And then what we typically think of as product development, product performances are numbers 5 and 6, and we'll talk some about that. And then the last grouping is experience. As many of you undoubtedly have heard, experiences are remembered by people far more than products are. If you give a child a new bicycle for Christmas and their first trip to Disneyland, the thing that they will probably remember their whole life is the trip to Disneyland more than the new bicycle. So experience becomes incredibly important, moving forward. So again, the things that are behind the scene, the stuff that make things work can be really critical, and at times you really have to pivot. It's the subject of how you make money. I do a lot of work with small companies that are trying to raise capital, and professional investors almost always ask early on, what's your business model? How do you make money? And surprisingly, a lot that, especially that are in product related businesses, haven't really thought it through. Or they will say there are 25 different ways to make money. We're going to do all of them, lacking focus, then it's another real problem. So understanding how you make money and knowing when you have to shift, when you have to change, becomes critically important. As virtually all newspapers learned, if they had not shifted to a digital format, most of them would be out of business. In fact, I think probably the majority of big city newspapers are a small fraction of what they once were, and in many cases, even with a good digital platform. But there are a few, like the New York Times and the LA Times and others, that have done reasonably well switching to digital. Another element in terms of this behind the scenes is how you put things together. And we're going to talk more about structure in a minute. This slide is from a company that I've been working with for quite a while that has a diagnostic product for determining cracks and fractures in teeth that cannot be picked up on an x-ray. And so this little device that you see from the top, it looks like a little miniature jackhammer encased in something with a disposable tip that is put up against a tooth. A little vibration takes place. The resulting waves, energy waves, are recorded and can show this data that is absolutely incredible. Well, years ago in the medical instrument business, it would be enough to develop an instrument and sell the instrument. That, however, doesn't produce continuing ongoing revenue for the manufacturer, so that they've had to figure out ways of making recurring revenue. Now, in the case of this product, the disposable tip is part of the recurring revenue. So those tips, which cost only a few cents to manufacture, are going to sell for several dollars, and one needs to be used with each patient. So you can see how it quickly multiplies. The other way that business has really changed, especially businesses that have mechanical or electromechanical devices, is by making them connect in one way or another to the internet. With the example of this device, every single one of these tapping on a tooth is recorded and analyzed and put into algorithms where this database is going to grow and grow and grow to big data. And there are increasingly numbers of products that will do the same thing. The innovation here is multifold, but the elements include recurring revenue and the use of data as important determinant of what's going to happen in the future. Now, we all know for years people have understood the differences between luxury marketing and lower mass market modeling. Well, both Rolex and Swatch have both learned how to make money, although the Rolex had a bump in the road when luxury sales declined, but I think they're coming back, by very different positioning. And so that's obviously a critical part of any innovation, is to think about where you fit, how you fit, and what your unique difference is. There are a lot of people that make cheap watches, but the leaders, Casio and Seiko and dozens of others, really don't hold a candle in a way to Swatch, which makes inexpensive watches of great design. And so they've continued to do well. Many companies think that they're going to start and they're going to support whatever they're doing by advertising. So they build a great website and they talk about the model and they're going to get some subscriptions and they're going to get this and that. And oh, by the way, we're going to have advertising on our website. Well, that's a lot easier said than done, and has to be thought about very carefully, because setting up a sales force to go out and get ads, as Facebook, for example, found out, is a very expensive, time-consuming process that needs to be carefully thought through. But if you look at all these other ways your profit model can be differentiated, you might get some ideas that can be useful to you or your clients. One of the things that I think is a very valuable tool for a lot of different businesses is the idea of bundling. Now, this happens to be an AT&T ad for bundling. Well, there are obvious advantages that as a consumer, you get a lower price because they give you a discount if you bundle lots of products together. And it's also an advantage to the manufacturer because they have, lower costs of sending statements and doing other kinds of things. The real advantage to bundling, though, is stickiness. So if you are bundling something from a supplier, you are much less likely to change one of them because you have to think through what does that do to the bundle. So that's the real benefit, and that's why they push it as hard as they possibly can. The network and how you work with others is also really important and can be incredibly good business in itself. Here are three very well-known joint ventures. Owens Corning Fiberglass was formed in 1935 and still is a leader in the fiberglass business. It's a long time to have a joint venture. And you've seen the success of MSNBC, and Hulu, I don't think has quite made the money they thought it was going to, but it has clearly become one of the important streaming networks. Also through merger and acquisition, you network, or you can consolidate, or as they say in the M&A business, roll up businesses into one. One of my favorites is Service Corp International, that went around to every small town in the United States, towns of 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, that had a funeral home, often with one funeral director, and they bought them up by the hundreds to get economies of scale and be able to sell caskets all together and funeral supplies. And it worked really well until people decided that cremation was a much lower cost way of burial, and the numbers of funerals have gone down dramatically, or at least funerals with burials in cemeteries have gone down dramatically. The structure of your business, configuration behind the scene is also really important. One of my favorite examples of how you structure and put pieces together is the iPhone. So if you look at all the items on the left there, Apple has used several of them in coming up with what's one of the most successful products ever launched. The fact that they did have this evangelical focus with Steve Jobs at the time, but they're able to carry it on and can continue slightly improving upon the product, but continuing to sell, even though overall sales are now declining as they're reaching saturation. They've also done an excellent job of the interface between hardware and software. Apple doesn't manufacture anything. Everything they do is outsourced, and which has been part of their strength and a way to leverage others. Here's another example in terms of structure. Structuring your workforce can be a very valuable way of developing new products and keeping employees engaged and rewarding employees. And here are some examples of some companies that have actually mandated that their employees spend time away from their main jobs, tinkering and thinking about other things. So the invention of Post-its is a well-known story at 3M, and Google News and Google Maps, especially the street view of Google Maps, all came out of this employees being asked to spend creative time away from their regular jobs. Well, one of the other things in terms of structural work week is there have been several tests now of companies, especially manufacturing companies, going to 4-day work weeks with great benefits to many of them, not all, because there's some companies that really just don't lend themselves to having much shorter work weeks. In fact, there's some that are 24/7, 7 days a week. But there are a number of them that have found if they have 4 10-hour days or 4 9.5-hour days, they are better off even paying some premium overtime in terms of the productivity and employee engagement. And the process is another key element. And whether that process is a marketing process or a manufacturing process or a customer delivery process can be a real differentiator and innovative. Well, up on the right, you see a Motorola pager, and you say, why is that relevant to innovation? Well, today it isn't, but at the time, before cell phones knocked them out of the box, Motorola had a factory in Miami, Florida, where it could receive an order, say, coming from Hong Kong, and within 45 minutes, produce a pager, program it for all the Hong Kong frequencies, put it in a box with an instruction note for Hong Kong, and labels on the outside for Hong Kong, and in a shipping container, all within 45 minutes. So that, if the paging business had continued, they probably would have continued really to be leaders. And they were leaders in the cell phone business for a relatively short period of time, but kind of took their eye off the ball, especially the marketing side of it. Amazon has just done an incredible job in terms of logistics systems, both in terms of how they do it internally, but also their customer engagement and the way Amazon Prime has taken off. I think worldwide, there's something like 180 million Amazon Prime customers. Well, at $125 a piece or something, that's a major source of revenue for them today. And intellectual property is also a very well-known process innovation by having massive numbers of patents and other intellectual property that creates both a strong offense because you create brands and development, but also a very strong defense. And while these companies spend a lot of time in court defending and in some cases, prosecuting others' patents, it really has been a very great strategy for many of them. In terms of product performance, now we're getting to what people really think is the kind of the critical part of innovation, but it's, as we've seen, it's just one part. But the most important part of it is really to be uniquely identified with something where you can stand, if not alone, at least head and shoulders above others. And so these are just some of the examples of products that I think over time have done a really good job of doing that. Procter & Gamble Swiffer, I think, is now the #1 way people in the United States clean their floors, more than using buckets and mops. And Volvo, as you know, for many years, used safety as their hallmark and really traded on it and created a brand image. And Rubbermaid, the functionality of what they do and how they do it. Patagonia has been a great leader in the outdoor segment with this real push toward environmental sensitivity. And a relatively recent newcomer, Method, in terms of soaps and detergents and other things, not only improve the product design aesthetically, but in terms of scent, function, and also being very environmentally friendly. And so they've been very quickly able to get a great market share. In addition to the products themselves, product systems and how products relate to one another are critically important. Here are some of my favorite examples. When Amazon bought Ring, they only had the Ring doorbell. And now within just a couple of years, they've gotten the Ring security systems out. And even better cases, Apple, and how they have taken their platform and used the initial idea that knocked off the Sony Walkman, with an iPod, and its various configurations that led to the iPhone, the iPad, and now the iWatch, all really well integrated in an overall system and platform, using the iOS system that had its roots in the Mac computer. Services, this is the experiences I started out saying is the longest lasting part of your offering. It's what people remember the most, is the kind of experience they had engaging with you or engaging with your company. and there are lots of innovative things that have been done. One of them, like Amazon, has this try before you buy program. You can now get 5 shirts sent to you in advance where they don't charge you for them for a given number of days, and they give you a return package to ship it back in. It is surprising how that has increased their sales. So instead of somebody buying a shirt, they will get 4 or 5, and they might keep 2 instead of 1. And so the shipping cost of returning it, especially because they've greatly improved their cost performance in terms of returns. I don't know if any of you lately have just taken a package back to a UPS store, no package, no nothing. You just have a QR code that they read and it's done. It's really, really remarkable. Loyalty programs have been very valuable over time. And a great many people collected airline miles. Well, obviously this year they haven't been quite so valuable. Although you may have seen companies like American and United and Delta in particular selling more miles and doing other things to promote miles. Again, it's probably to get stickiness. They want you to accumulate these miles that at some point you're going to say, well, gee, I'm going to have to use them for something. And the more of those you have, the more you'll probably use them. And so it's probably, good marketing, although there have been lots of consumer switches. People would much rather use a card from somebody that gives them 3% cash back than airline miles these days. So a lot of that's taking place. Personalized service. There are provisors members that work for Bank of California. In the massive banks where ATM machines rule and there's virtually no service these days, that's become a very big differentiator. And there are a number of these kinds of things that can be done. The channel is understandably also important, how you get products to people. And there are some great examples of innovation and difference in people doing new things. Flagship stores, the department stores and apparel stores for decades have had high-end flagship stores, but hard goods companies have started doing it too. For example, we talked about Swatch watches. They now have their own stores. This store in the upper right here is a Sony store, and Microsoft and Apple. Apple has magnificent stores as a part of their overall branding and customer experience. Tesla broke the mold in not using dealers. In fact, still, you can't buy a Tesla in the state of New Jersey because the law there, sponsored by the Distributor Association, still prevents the retailing of cars except through regular car distributors and dealers. But they have been wildly successful bypassing the dealer and doing everything on a direct basis.
Jim, it's
Yes.
Linda. Interesting intersection. Tesla now has a store inside the mall here in the San Fernando Valley.
They do in the West Side as well.
The mall itself just opened this week, and I was walking upstairs and looked down, and there's a build out, so it juts out into the public space with a Tesla showroom.
And if you want, you can make an appointment to have someone come to your house and bring you a car to test drive.
And they've also got them in the parking lot if you want to walk out to the parking lot and hop in.
Yeah, no, they've done a very clever job, and it's shown in their sales results. One of the masters of pop-ups is Nike, and you can look at these stores that are really shipping containers that in a few hours they can set up or tear down one of these stores and move it to the next location. They've been very successful in doing it, as have several other companies. I go to tennis tournaments periodically, and the tennis retailers have pop-up stores that they can put together and take apart in an afternoon, and it's greatly helped their sales. Multi-level marketing, even though Herbalife has had a checkered history and kind of a bad reputation, depending on who you talk to, they of course say they never do wrong, but they constantly get sued. But it has been a powerful marketing method, less so because of Amazon, and also companies like Amway and Rubbermaid and others that use direct marketing or multi-level marketing schemes have had troubles, but it's still, in the right circumstances, can work well. But again, these are just various things that can be used for innovation in a business. Now I see Kevin Walker is here, and he's a branding expert. And I even used his phrase at the top of this slide: "A brand is a promise delivered." Although my definition of branding is it is the sum total of everything a consumer or user thinks about you, your company, and your products. It's the sum total of it all. But branding becomes critical. It is the overarching thing, and we'll talk more about that at the end of this presentation. And it can be done in lots of different ways. At the top, you'll see 3 products sold by Kroger. One that is their absolute plain vanilla brand. The second one is a house brand, but they've given it a brand name with Simple Truth Organic. And then they're using third-party brands. Well, all of those have a place, a position, a price point, and I'm just waiting for somebody to innovate with another form. Marriott has bought a huge number of hotels, and I think it's got a much more challenging branding situation than a lot of companies because there are so many brands. Now you can see here they've tried to classify them and group them, but even that is tough to do. They're fine points. They've also introduced the name Bonvoy, which is now for their loyalty program, and it is confusing people. They don't know what Bonvoy means versus what Marriott means. The Marriott used to have a fairly clear path because they had Marriott, and then they had Fairfield Inns by Marriott and Courtyards by Marriott and Renaissance by Marriott. But now with the profusion of brands they have, I think they've got a tougher job. But they've still been, until COVID hit, they were quite successful. And my guess is they will bounce back, in due time. And customer engagement, again, experience is a very important thing because it's the longest part of your offering. And in customer engagement, there are all sorts of examples. You look on the far right, everybody's familiar with the Amazon, ordering bar or column, whatever you call that. They make it so easy, one click and it's done. You don't even have to go to the cart anymore. You just hit buy now, and within a couple of days, the product's on your doorstep. In terms of curation, I don't know anybody that doesn't, get kind of excited when they see a Tiffany blue box, or if you get one of the what used to be the not as expensive as the Neiman Marcus catalog, but Tiffany catalogs were really curated museum, catalogs as opposed to sales brochures. They've done a superb job. Now, less so in recent years because tastes have changed and it's been very difficult at retail. But for many, many decades, they really led. Status and recognition. The Soho House is now getting clubs, some of which are just restaurant clubs and some that have rooms all over the world as status and recognition. They're kind of the old British men's club for the young, newly affluent. I didn't say nouveau riche, but that often is kind of the case. Also, whimsy and personality have been very effective marketing tools, except there's a caveat. I mean, everybody, Flo is one of the most recognized actresses on television, and the Geico Gecko and the Aflac Duck. But years ago, Aflac did a survey, and fewer than 20% knew the kind of insurance that Aflac sold. So as powerful as the Aflac Duck was in terms of memorability and people liking it, people just didn't really know what business they were in. So they've started to change that. But even then, I'm wondering if everybody here knows, or I'm sure Jim does, but what everybody knows the kind of insurance each of those 3 companies sell. I remember 2 years ago, many of you may remember Alka-Seltzer and the slogan, I can't believe I ate the whole thing. That was the most successful advertising campaign of the year, or maybe of the decade. And yet Alka-Seltzer sales stagnated. no growth at all, even though it was a great advertising campaign that everybody made fun of, everybody talked about, but it just didn't work. This to me is one of the more brilliant marketing things that is not a positive, uplifting thing, but it sure smacks you in the face. The fact that the New York Times varied from their 100-year history and gave the entire front page to the names of COVID death patients, I thought was just remarkable. And, because it really made a statement, and it made a statement about the New York Times, which has been, pretty stodgy in many ways. So that I think it was a very innovative thing for them to do at the time. So anyway, that was a very quick, around this wheel. This is a chart that is part of this presentation that I would be happy to send anybody that would like it. So it lists all of these various kinds of innovation and gives better definitions than I did. But be happy to send it along if you'd like it. One of the other things.
Great, please do.
Yeah. Okay. This is a list, and actually here's another one too. This one is from Boston Consulting Group, and this one is from Fortune Magazine, of the 50 most innovative companies, and they do it every year. And you'll see the pluses, Apple was +2 and Alphabet was down 1. Well, the importance of this is not just for innovation, but if you notice that these companies are also the ones with the highest brand value of any companies. Now, there are a couple of exceptions up and down, but by and large, these most innovative companies are also the ones with the highest brand value. The brand value is the difference between its market value, what the trading value, market cap of its stock is, less the tangible net asset value of the company, is the brand value. The difference between hard assets and what people really perceive as future earnings are going to be worth. And these companies that are the innovators are also the ones that tend to have the greatest brand value. And the innovation is not just product, but it's a whole variety of services and many of the things that we saw on those earlier charts. So with that, I would be happy to discuss this, take some questions, and I will stop screen sharing.
Jim, I have a question real quick, and that is, and maybe you've covered it, but one of the biggest problem with innovation, I think, is that people innovate before they go look at what the opportunities are in the market. That they, I think it's one thing to have the best mousetrap, but you got to see if people want to buy it, right? And so a lot of companies.
That's a whole different discussion, but you're absolutely right. That's critically important.
And but is there a simple answer to are there words you can say to someone to help them get out of that mindset? You know what I'm saying? I mean, how do you help a client? Yeah.
Well, I think it's just the way you've done it is saying, before we jump ahead and make big investments and spend a lot of money, we need to evaluate the market potential for this. Now, even companies as arrogant as Apple have started to change their ways. It's no longer just engineering design driven. And they're starting to understand that they've got to much better understand their consumer markets and positioning.
I was going to add a term that a lot of people use is product market fit. So your technology and what it can be used for, and then you have to fit it to the market fit. So the term called product market fit.
Absolutely. No question about that. Yeah.
Jim, I'll go back to the insight you shared earlier about what COVID has triggered, because 25 years ago at SC, I attended a presentation by a professor who had written a book called Danger in the Comfort Zone. And it was all about all the companies that created success. And as their industries changed around them, they were completely resistant and ossified and protective, and that the companies literally had to get into catastrophic circumstances before they were willing to say, oh, maybe we ought to start looking at innovation. They wouldn't even create a subdivision because they were worried that the new ideas would cannibalize the old, and didn't realize, well, that might be your company's salvation.
Yeah. Well, yeah, a perfect example of it, I mentioned Motorola. Motorola was by far the leader in the cell phone business. I mean, they owned the paging business, by far the leader in the cell phone business, the leader in the police radio business, two-way communications, and all of their senior managers were engineers. 100%, even the CFO had an engineering degree. And that lack of diversity, if you will, in terms of thinking and approach cost them dearly. Because they had the technology and they had the market position and they had the branding, but then they took their eye off the ball. And it was, and then it was really Palm and BlackBerry that came along that you know, neither of whom were ultimately successful, because Apple learned from BlackBerry and Palm what they should put in a smartphone. And because all they really did is they took the concepts of BlackBerry and Palm and what they've been doing with the iPod, put it all together. And so that in itself was genius, but it wasn't that they were compiling or curating as opposed to really innovating. Although there's obvious innovation putting it all together, and a lot of engineering involved in doing it.
Jim, if we're going to innovate in our own businesses, are there like first step? What are the, I mean, you gave us a lot of information there. So what is what do you think the first 3 steps are to innovate no matter what we do in our?
Well, I think that the first is to have a very clear definition of what your company's mission is and what the vision is. You know, the old mission vision thing still counts, still is important. And the values of your company, because that will inform it as well. But once that's firmly in mind, and if you're willing to be flexible and maybe think about how your mission has to change because the world is changing, or your vision has to change because the world is changing, then I think that's really the foundation you need to start with. And sometimes it's opportunistic because, I remember a great example. Illinois Tool Works was in the machine tool business. And somebody came to them and said, gee, I've developed these little rings that can go on top of soda cans to eliminate the cost of the cardboard carriers. And Illinois Tool Works made those and made millions and millions and millions until people decided that was environmentally not a good product, because they were thrown on beaches and fish and birds and others were getting killed from these plastic rings. It's like the pop tops. Remember pop tops off of cans? Well, kids were swallowing them and people were getting cut with them and so on. So those had to go as well. But still, those were all innovations for their time and made a difference for their time. Sometimes not as well thought through maybe as they should be.
But some of that sounds a little bit like luck or serendipity. Someone came and talked. I mean, how do you get that to happen with your own team?
I think still good old-fashioned brainstorming with knowledgeable people, and often with people outside your inner circle. So years ago, we had a client that was in the mirror business, and the mirror business, and all of the managers of this company were men. Yet 85% of mirrors are bought by women, and these men were all 55 to 65. And the average buyer of mirrors is 28 to 35, 25 to 38 or 35-year-old women. So, and they were struggling, and they couldn't get a presentation to Bed Bath & Beyond. They were doing a lot of business with Lowe's, but they couldn't get in Bed Bath & Beyond. We put together a panel of 3 women, one a retailer, one an interior designer, and one who was a buyer, and had them form a focus panel with the members of management. And within 6 months, we had product in Bed Bath & Beyond that was totally different than anything that they had thought of before. But it took some brainstorming and keeping an open mind. And sometimes, because especially small companies don't have big resources, you have to be kind of creative and think about what you do. So in this particular case, we challenged each one of the members of management and each one of the members of the advisory panel to go and get magazines, shelter magazines, other kinds of magazines, and to rip out pictures of mirrors and bring them to the next meeting. And we covered an entire wall with pictures of mirrors. And then we started kind of creatively brainstorming, but we had a base of information that we could use to start doing it. Then once what the company used to do was they would go to Lowe's and they would take 30 mirrors and set up a hotel room in Atlanta, have the buyer come in and say, what do you want to buy? And half of them would be dogs. So we then started doing intercept meetings at malls, very inexpensively. One person, we would rent an empty store, put up these mirrors, grab consumers in, say, do you like this one better than that one? So on. Just relatively simple marketing research, but we had data. And so there were some that we knew that we shouldn't take and show at all. And we had some others that we thought really were going to be winners, and then some in the middle. So we would take that group and the data to the buyer at Lowe's and said, our research has shown that these three should knock it out of the box. We don't think these are suitable, so we didn't bring them. We might have shown them pictures. And we're not sure, we think we ought to do some testing. The sales immediately increased because there was that little bit of informal, not very scientific, but at least indicative research.
You know, one of the things we're doing in our marketing group, Hema and I, is trying to encourage customers to let us start by interviewing their customers. Because I think we all start with kind of preconceived notions from years of experience of working with customers of what they think. And it's nice to get some fresh point of view of what really are they thinking now, because as you have, and Linda have said, you know, COVID and the world, politics, whatever you want to say, environment, it's all changing. And so people's concerns are changing, and it's important to have an independent person talk to somebody. And like you said, it doesn't have to be scientific. It's just great data.
Yeah.
So, are there more questions? Well, we're right up against the 45 minutes as usual. There's something in chat. Is anybody asking a question in chat?
Nope.
It's been great, and we really appreciate it, Jim. What a great performance. I'm going to put all this up on the website along with his handout. It'll be up there. So in my blog at reynoldsgroupweb.com. And thank you very much. Come next week. We've got Hema Day as our spotlight, talking about how to get more business on and sales off the web. So join us, please.
Thanks much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jim. You were
Talk to you.
awesome.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.